Welcome back to another Pirkei Avot text explication. We are in the third chapter and now on the sixth text. Now this one, which is spoken by Rabbi Chalafta, son of Dosa, the leader of the village of Hananiah, he actually makes a statement that is intriguingly similar and yet somewhat of an expansion of not one but two sayings we have encountered earlier on in this chapter. So here we go. He says, 10 who sit, 10 who are sitting and they're endeavoring in Torah study, the divine presence rests amongst those 10, as it is said, quoting from Psalms 82, that God stands in the congregation of God. Okay, 10, that's very nice. But then he continues. He says, and where is it that this exists, that if even with five, that even if five are sitting and endeavoring in Torah, that the divine presence rests amongst them, as it is said, quoting from the book of Amos, chapter 9, the band of his he has established on earth, or this band of his he has established on earth. Okay, interesting. And then he continues. He says, how do we know that even from just three who are sitting and endeavoring in the study of Torah, the divine presence rests amongst them, as it is said, going back to Psalms 82, in the midst of the judges, he judges. Okay, interesting. How do we know this even with two? It says, and quoting from Malachi chapter 3, then they that fear the Lord spoke with one another, and the Lord hearkened and heard. Not satisfied with this, Rabbi Chalafta, son of Dosa, the leader of the village of Hananiah, says, how do we know even just with one, that the divine presence rests amongst this person who is sitting and endeavoring in Torah study, as it is said, quoting from the book of Exodus chapter 20, in every place where I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come unto you and bless you. Okay, there is a lot going on here. We have seen earlier, if any of this sounds familiar, we have seen in this chapter, earlier in this chapter, in text number 2, that Rabbi Hananiah, son of Tradion, says, if two sit together, and he talks about both if there are words of Torah and if there are no words of Torah spoken amongst them. So this seems to be an expansion. We're talking about two. Now here, what we have with Rabbi Chalafta, son of Dosa, the leader of the village of Hananiah, that he talks about 10, but then in almost like a bargaining way, like we see in the book of Genesis with Abraham bargaining with God and just going down and down, that 10, 5, 3, 2, 1. Clearly, 10 is a really lovely number, right? It's a very strong number here. 5 is an interesting stretch. 5 is not really much of a significant number. It doesn't get a lot of attention in rabbinic literature, but he makes an interesting scriptural claim for that. And then he even goes down to 3, which we did see earlier in text number 3 in this chapter with Rabbi Shimon talking about 3 who have eaten together upon a table and speaking words of Torah. So at least 3 exists elsewhere. And we have 2 we saw earlier with, I mentioned Rabbi Hananiah, son of Tradion, talking about the 2. And then he goes further here and talks about now just even 1. Really interesting. I think the idea is that in the idea of Rabbi Chalafta, son of Dosa, this leader of the village of Hananiah, what he's advocating is no matter how many, right? So with 10, that's a lovely, like it's a minyan, right? It's a great strong number, and it's almost more easily perceivable that some notion of the divine presence is dwelling and resting amongst them. It's definitely some really fascinating, innovative moves on his part to talk about 5 and 3 and 2 and 1 even. But the idea for him, I think, is really about how can we experience the divine presence, especially after the destruction of the temple? How can we experience that? And clearly, no matter how many people, even just 1, no matter how many people, the study of Torah can help provide the experience of the divine presence. So that's what those are Rabbi Chalafta ben Dosa, the leader of the village of Hananiah, has to offer here. And thank you so much for watching.